Our world is one unit, and yet we have artificially created different countries and selfishly focused on what is good for each of us. What the world needs today is effective collaboration between nations to address critical issues such as climate change, reducing poverty through focusing on education, health, and job creation. What the world needs today is not to highlight our differences based on color and religion, but with compassion and care, embrace and respect our differences. What the world does not need is to be obsessively focused on our GDPs and the armament race, but have deep care and concern for the well-being of all. World needs us to teach our future generation to be good human beings so that we do not end up using our technology and our power to harm and hurt each other. The world needs to create a safe, meaningful, and worthwhile space for all to live for generations to come.
We start the session, yours truly, Remo Fernandes. Through this conversation, we hope to know more about Remo's inspiring creative journey, his experiences, and learnings in the process. In conversation with Mr. Remo Fernandes will be Mr. Shantanu Datta. Shantanu Datta has been a journalist for over 3 decades, writing, as he loves to say, on everything from election rallies to rock concerts. Shantanu began his tryst with journalism at the Telegraph. Later, he joined the Indian Express in Delhi. After spending 3 years there, he moved again to head editions of the Indian Express and the New Indian Express in Mumbai, Pune, and Bangalore. His interactions with several stellar musicians of diverse genres from across the world in these cities prompted his first book, Calling Elvis, Conversations with Some of the Music's Greatest, a Personal History. We will now watch a short video on our esteemed guest Remo Fernandes. Post that, Mr. Shantanu Datta can take the conversation forward.
Hello, everybody. I was waiting. Hi, Remo. Can you hear me?
Hi, Shantanu. Yes, I can hear
Hello,
you.
Remo. Hello. I was actually waiting for a video to air, but I think that's not coming. So let's start. Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. And today's guest is Remo Fernandes, and I can tell you I'm really excited to talk to him. His music, his life, and all that has come across in his autobiography. As you know, it's just out, published by HarperCollins. The book is a lovely read. It's a coming of
Thank you,
age tale.
Shantanu.
It's a coming of age tale about a boy with dreams. The boy's journey to becoming a man, but without losing sight of that dream. Of course, music is central to the dream, the soundtrack of his life. There is love and hope, and tragedy too. And in this book, he pours his heart out about the people who mattered to him and his many relationships, told honestly, without holding anything back, The pages, over 480 of them, have pictures and illustrations and also snapshots of some of the memorable songs that he has written. Yet, Remo, the autobiography, is also about Goa and the time we have lost. There are stories of Bombay, where he went to study architecture, and then a hop, skip, and jump tour of Europe, and then again back to Goa. The tone is intimate, loving. The underlying intent of the book, for me, was not so much to set off bouts of nostalgia, but the idea of harking back to life in the 60s and 70s is, I feel, a reminder of who we were, what we believed in as a people, and how central music is to this very idea of coexistence that exists in many Indias that thrive in one beautiful India. So have I got it right, Remo? This is my takeaway from the book.
You got it absolutely right, Shantanu. Except I wouldn't call my stay in Europe at that time a hop, skip, and jump, because I stayed for 2 years, almost two and a half
Wow.
years.
Okay.
When I hitchhiked around during the summer, and I traveled around 8 countries in Europe as well as North Africa. So to me, it really felt like a much longer period of time than a hop,
Right.
skip, and jump. But otherwise, you were absolutely right. Everything you said is right up.
So, I before I get to the songs, and I'm sure the audience and everyone wants to talk about that. I want to start at the beginning. I found the moment your father gave you that harmonica, and you
Mhm.
started playing, and you speak of this tune called the Blue Tango, and which you loved, and
Yes.
you wanted to play that. Just take us through that moment if you can.
The Blue Tango had an introduction like that was the introduction before the song started. And I was trying to play that tune, the introduction, and I couldn't get the pa. I could I couldn't get the pa 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 pa. And I was all of 6, oh no, 4 or 5 years old. I don't remember. And I was sitting under the bed crying when my father got back home from office, and he asked my mother, why is he crying? And my mother couldn't really understand. So when he heard that I could not get that one note, he was musical. My father was very musical. He understood that that as a child I knew the difference between a sharp and a normal note, and that I wanted the sharp, and because I could not get that sharp, I was crying. So he got very excited. He got more excited about the fact that I could recognize those notes and that I was looking for them, and I knew that the other note was not the right one. So he put me in the. He asked me to get dressed up and put me in the car, and he got me a professional mouth organ with a button,
Yeah.
with a button where you could get those the hidden ones. To me, they were hidden notes, the sharps and the flats and stuff like that. And well, that was the moment that I remember. I remember very clearly. I wrote in the book only what I could remember. I didn't go
Right. Right.
asking people for suggestions and stuff.
Yeah, that's quite a lot. It's very detailed. I'm actually, you have a good memory. A lot of it
I'm
is
surprised myself, Santanu. I'm
right.
surprised that so much came
Right.
back to memory.
You also talk of the song Shivole Sonar Khetti. Have I
Yes,
pronounced it right?
you pronounce it
This is
absolutely right.
right. So this is tell us about the song because I'm intrigued. This was your father's favorite song, and you
Yes,
recorded it this year as a tribute to him.
yes,
And
exactly. Uh,
so
it was a song which my father found on a record. At that time, finding records in Konkani was already pretty rare. And this was a song about his village. He loved Siolim. Although we lived in Panjim at that time, I was born and brought up in Panjim. He came back very excited from the record shop one day saying, I found a record which is about Siolim, which is about Shiole. Shiole is how it's called in Konkani. And
okay,
and Sioli was the Portuguese version of Shivole. And now people who say it in English, they say Siolim. And but
okay.
Shivole is the original name of this village. And
Mhm.
it was Shivole, Sonara Keti, la 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 la. That was a tune. and he heard it many, many times, and therefore, of course, so did the whole household.
Hmm.
And that tune remained in my mind all these years somehow. Although the lyrics didn't. And as I was writing the autobiography, so many memories came back, as we just said. And then I wanted to find this song again, so I tried to contact the original artist, who of course had expired. So I found his son in Bombay, living in Bombay now, and another friend of mine helped me get the lyrics, and then I recorded the song. I just had to
Oh,
re-record it for my
wow.
own pleasure, but also as a tribute to the original composer, as well as a tribute to my father. You know.
Okay, okay. So starting off with the harmonica, and
Yeah.
in 1966, you write that you had formed a band. You were in Bombay, and you guys were playing Beatles and Rolling Stones, and before that, so by then, when did you sort of realize that you could not just play the harmonica? You went and moved to guitar, and you're pretty much a multi instrumentalist. You obviously the flute is part of your repertoire. Then you play on
Yeah.
stage. We see you with a guitar, but you produce all your songs yourself, sitting at home in the
Yes, in the
studio. So
recording studio, yes. Almost all my recordings are solo efforts where I play and I program every instrument. I sing all the voices, all the harmonies, and the main vocals. I also
okay,
handle the mixing and engineering myself.
right, right,
I love,
right.
I've always loved doing that somehow. And
Okay,
also the recording studios being what they are here, or in Goa, there was no recording studio when I started
right.
out. So the only way that I could do it was to do it all all by myself.
Mhm.
And it's a style of recording which has stayed with me. I feel it saves a lot of time because I don't have to teach the song to other musicians. Well, if I had musicians who could add to my song, who could add their own contributions to my song, that would be great.
Mhm.
But instead of teaching someone how to play my song exactly the way that I have it in mind, I find it much faster to do it myself.
Right,
And
right, right. So,
and I
what is
can
your
do it.
preferred? Sorry, please continue. Sorry.
No, and also this way I can work as and when I feel like.
Mhm.
Whereas I couldn't call a drummer at 3 o'clock in the morning, for example, or I couldn't call a bass guitarist at maybe not at 6 in the morning. And this way I can work, I can record, and I can re-record if I want to redo a part anytime I want. So a whole lot of advantages to
Yeah.
to doing it all myself.
Okay. And what is your preferred instrument when you're composing, or when you hear a tune in your head and which you would like to sort of put it down? So which is the instrument that you grab? Do you go for the guitar, or is just anything that's in front of you?
It is the guitar actually. Most of the time it is the guitar. If I am in a place where there is an instrument, then it's it's got to be the guitar. If
Okay.
I'm in the studio and if I'm in a hurry just to lay down the basics, then the keyboard is easier because it's all connected and MIDI. I don't have to mic it and stuff like that. So just to lay the basics, at least the keyboard is easier. Yeah, but this is a
Mhm.
very good question, Shantanu, because not many people realize that the instrument on which you compose dictates a lot of the tune and the chord progression. Because
Right.
if you are more proficient at a certain instrument and you compose on that instrument, you tend to be more adventurous with the chord progressions and the melodies
Right.
and stuff like that. And I'm a guitarist. I'm not really a keyboard player. I play the keyboard out of necessity
Okay.
because nowadays so much can be programmed on the keyboard.
Right. Okay.
So
Okay.
yes, the
Yeah.
guitar.
So a preferred instrument sort of makes the palette larger. You have a larger
Exactly,
palette to play around with. Right.
exactly, exactly.
So coming to your early days in Bombay when you had formed a band, or before
By the
before you moved to Bombay,
Yeah, by
much
the way,
much better.
if I may interrupt you, in between
Yes,
the Mount Organ episode and the band in Bombay, there was very much a band in Goa,
of course.
which
Yes, that's what I was coming to.
yeah,
And
I'm
and
sorry.
and
Yeah.
you and your friends were playing Beatles, Rolling Stones, and all
Yes,
that.
yes.
But I want to know, when is it that you realized that you had to write your own songs? Playing Beatles, which was great and people were loving it, wasn't enough. I mean, when did that bug sort of bite you? That
I
that
can tell you when, but I cannot tell you why and how. I was 14. I know for sure that I was 14 when I felt like writing my own song.
Okay.
And I was sitting again with the guitar one day. I still remember it was in the veranda of our house in Panjim, and I don't know why, like I told you, and I
Hmm.
can never ever figure out what it is that made a kid, meaning a 14-year-old teenager, even think of writing his own song. But the song came out of me. Uh, One reason I can think of is that the Beatles were writing their own songs, and until then, all the music stars I knew or listened to or heard about, whether it was Cliff Richard or Elvis Presley, they never wrote their own songs. They were pretty boys with pretty voices, and they had an army of composers, arrangers, lyric writers behind them, and they gave voice to those songs beautifully, of course, you know, marvelously. But the Beatles wrote their own songs, and that was such a breakthrough. Until then, the composers were not necessarily the best singers. And it
Correct.
was only later on in the 70s, for example, there's somebody like Carly Simon was kind of allowed to have her own album. And she had written such, super masterpieces. You've got a friend and this and that and so many masterpieces. But she was a composer who used to write again for others. But the Beatles did it much earlier in the 60s.
Hmm.
They were writing their own songs, singing their own songs, playing, orchestrating, arranging their own songs. They were
Right.
an
Right.
inspiration for sure.
Okay. But Beatles were four and you were one, so you did it all yourself.
You reminded me of Carlos Jobim, or was it the Brazilian guy who wrote all
Mhm.
those masterpieces, all those bossa novas, whether Desafinado,
Jobim,
Baiana da
Carlos
Lapa.
Jobim. Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes. Carlo
Uh,
Antonio Jobim.
yes. At that time, he was on the top of the charts,
Yes.
every year. And then suddenly the Beatles came out, and somebody told him, there's a new group called the Beatles, and they have bypassed you in the charts. They are at number one now. So he thought for a moment, and he said, "Yeah, but there are four of them, aren't there?" Whereas he was doing it alone. So
Right.
your statement has now reminded me so much of his.
Okay. I I want to talk about the first day the telephone arrived at your house, primarily
Yeah,
because you have such a memorable song on the telephone itself, which the whole of India knows, and
much
especially
later.
us who grew up with the old landlines way before mobile phones were in vogue.
Yes, way, way
So
before.
you write about the time, and you say you had a phone. Your phone came, and you had a friend Alexander who was a very good musician. His house probably had a phone too, and in those days in Goa, you didn't have to really dial a number because very
No,
few people had a phone, and the operator would pick up, and you just had to speak out the name of the person whom you wanted to speak to, and they would
exactly,
connect. So
exactly.
so I found that fascinating. So from there till the time you penned your own song, Graham Bell. I'm sure there is a link there.
No, there is no link. If at all there's a link, it's a downward link. Because at
Right.
that time, when there were no telephone numbers and only names, is that telephones worked fine, and it was still during the Portuguese days, and the
Right.
telephone was not in our house. We didn't have a right to have a telephone in our house. My father had a telephone at his factory. He had a cold drink
Okay.
and aerated waters factory. So because it was a business enterprise, he was allotted a telephone from the first batch.
I
And
see.
his brother, my uncle, who was a surgeon, he had one in his house. So I, as a kid, used to run to the factory, yeah, which was very close to our house, just behind our house, in fact. And I used to telephone my cousins, my uncles, the
Mhm.
surgeons' children. And the telephones worked, and they always worked.
Right.
When I wrote Graham Bell, it was many, many years later when I started living in Siolim. Now, Siolim is a village which is 10 kilometers away from Mapsa. A lot of people might have heard this name. Some, of
Yes.
course, those who frequent Goa will know where is Mapsa, where is Siolim. And then another 10 kilometers and comes Panjim. So if I had a, so by that time, this was in the 80s now.
Yeah.
Yeah, already in the 80s.
already in the
And
80s.
the first telephone was in the 50s, in the late 50s, which worked fine. And in the 80s, the telephones, we had to drive all the way to Mapsa and go to the post office there and book a trunk call to Panjim, which was 10 kilometers away. And the trunk call took longer than it would take us to drive all the way to Panjim and deliver the message and come back. You know,
Right.
and the telephones were a nightmare, really. So
Yes,
that's
yes, yes.
what made me write that song and a whole lot of other songs. At that time
Right,
in my life,
right,
because
right.
until then I was writing all my songs, almost all my songs were romantic songs.
Mhm.
They were all about relationships, about all my relationships, with my girlfriends and stuff like that. And when I came back from Europe, I started to see the changes which were taking place in Goa. You can notice changes even in a person if you have not seen that person for a while. If you keep seeing that
Right.
person every day, then the changes take place so naturally and so gradually you don't notice them. So when I saw Go after 2 years, I started seeing how the telephones had deteriorated, how beautiful rice fields were, were destroyed, and ugly buildings were coming up there. They were not even beautiful in keeping with Goan architecture, and a whole lot of things like that.
Mhm.
And those are the issues that I started writing about,
Right,
and the romantic aspect of my songs started taking a back seat, and my songs became more, topic oriented or issue oriented.
right. So this thing that you did with your music, this little changeover that you did internally, is sort of
Yeah,
given a wider context, a wider sense of purpose to your Uber. It's not just entertainment. There is you're writing and
exactly,
talking about real people and real incidents and
exactly,
real things. Exactly.
exactly.
So, and you connected with the audience, which was fantastic. So, but
Yes.
correct me if I'm wrong. Not much of that is happening now in the
No.
mainstream music sphere.
Yeah.
So, would you like to say something about it? I mean, why is this?
Yes,
Why?
definitely, definitely. Let's not forget that our generation, my generation, was what is worldwide known as the Woodstock generation. You know,
Right.
and the Woodstock generation did a whole lot of songs which were anti-establishment, songs against the war. For example, America and Nixon, they were raging this war against Vietnam and bombing innocent farmers and
Right.
uh, and people in Vietnam, and the American youth is the one responsible for starting songs with meaning and with a purpose, with a political and sociological purpose.
Okay.
At that time, the youth was interested in those things, and they followed it. And the music was greatly responsible for a whole lot of political changes in America and in the world.
Okay.
I think in the meantime, and the government and the American government was caught unawares. They never expected that music was going to affect them so badly, and they
Mhm.
allowed it. They allowed the music to flourish. They allowed these festivals to take place, and before they knew it, the whole youth had turned against them or saw through their games. You know,
Yes.
and but then they grew wise. But then the governments grew wise and they studied and they learned from the past lesson. So by the
Mhm.
time that Bush came to power, that was a few generations later, or much later, a few presidents later rather. By the time Bush came to power, he started not arresting, but banning from appearing on radio anybody who wrote about against him or against the Iraq War. So right at the root, he clipped it. You remember there was an American group that was banned. The first one was a all girls group. Was
Yes.
the Pussycat Dolls or some
Pussycat
weird
Dolls.
name
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and they had written a song against Bush or criticizing Bush. Boom, they were banned from airplay. They were banned from the recording, uh, from the record company that they were working for, and they had learned their lesson from Woodstock, from the Woodstock generation. They realized and they had learned how dangerous music could be. It wasn't just music as they thought
Right.
before. They saw the
Right.
power of the music and they stemmed it and they cut it off right at the root.
Mhm.
So you can't only blame. the younger generation for not being interested in political songs anymore. There are no political songs, and perhaps due to people like Bush, you know, and
Mhm.
all the censorship,
Right,
behind
right,
documents which don't
absolutely.
allow it to exist. So
Right,
if political songs don't even exist, how can the youth be blamed for not listening to them or being influenced by them?
correct, correct. But there has to be a beginning again, don't you think so?
There has to
Somebody
be,
has.
yes, yes, there has to be, and I hope there is one soon because the world needs
Right,
it badly. The youth needs
right,
it badly,
right.
but let's not forget we're working against the system.
Yes, yes.
The, the
If
system
I
is
may,
again. I'm sorry.
right. No, no. Right. So I would like to sort of just talk a little bit about your days in Bombay with the Savages and its
Yes,
many in sort of incarnations. I was particularly curious to know about the time you all called yourselves the Savage Encounters and you played CSN songs with Nandu Bhende, another
yeah.
legendary name in Bombay, and he played lead vocals and you did the harmonies. So you are very fond of harmonies, is it? In generally when
Oh
you
yes, in almost all my recordings,
right.
there are harmonies with the main songs. Yeah.
Mhm. And what were the Savages like? What kind of music you all were playing? And Bombay had this very vibrant music culture, as did Calcutta in my time and even the time before me. And
Yes.
Savages is also talked of as one of the pioneers of Indian band, just like say High in Calcutta with
Yes.
Dilip Balakrishnan and all. So what was it like being in the Savages and what kind of songs did you all do?
Unfortunately, the songs were mostly cover versions, which was the thing to do at that time, with
Right.
a few originals, interspersed in between the cover versions. But I must tell you what what joining the Savages meant to me, because
Right.
before I went to Bombay, I was a schoolboy in Goa, right? And in Goa, we had our favorite records, which we grouped to at parties and we listened to. And out of all those foreign records, mostly Beatles and the Shadows, and I told you about them, and Black is Black by Los Bravos, and Woolly Bully by Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. In the middle of all that, there were two records by two Indian bands that we grouped to. And
Okay.
one was, Love is a Mango by the Cavaliers from Calcutta, which was a
Okay.
beautiful romantic song. And the second one was Simple Simon Says by the Savages in Bombay.
Okay.
And to us, they were recording artists. And being a recording artist was way up there, beyond reach, beyond reach. So they actually had records and we listened to them and we danced, to them. So they were not even real people. They were recording artists. That's it. And when I go to Bombay, it's straight out of school, and through some incident or the other, I'm asked to audition for the Savages, and I'm selected, and I'm asked to join the Savages. These guys who just a few months earlier were unreachable heroes. So that is what it meant to a 16, 17-year-old,
Right.
joining the Savages. Uh, something else at that time and at that age.
Right. 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 And
There
for
is
us
a,
listeners, sorry, please continue.
no, there is a noise. There is a noise happening somewhere here. Is it disturbing the recording?
No,
There is
no,
some
no,
motor.
no. I can't
Okay,
hear it. No, no.
okay, good.
Uh, so you said, about playing covers, but just an aside, people like us, youngsters who are listening to music and wanting to listen to more music and who love music. So bands like the Savages, of course, I didn't hear them. I was in Calcutta, but I can speak
Yeah,
of High and Shiva and the bands in Calcutta who did covers. High also
yeah.
did a huge body of their own work, and but they would play covers of songs which were not really known. Grateful Dead, an unfamiliar song of Grateful Dead. So it was a
Mhm.
sort of an education for us. So you guys, when you all played the covers, it was also for people like us to be introduced to that particular band and song. So I
Yes,
believe
that's true.
it had a huge role to play in our appreciation of music.
That's true.
And
And in your exposure to music as well.
exactly. And as a musician, you will know much better than I that playing covers, it sounds that oh, he's a covers band, but just imagine the skill that is required to play to be a good covers band is just superlative. I mean, you really have to be really good to play songs from different bands with varying levels of skill.
Yes, but it's about as good as what is required to be a good Xerox machine. Being a good Xerox machine is one thing, and doing your
Of
own
course.
writing, your own drawing, your own
Of
work is
course.
something else. But you're right.
In
Yeah, covers at that time were something to look up to, and the more we sounded like the record, the better we felt we were, the better everybody else felt we were.
right,
We should not
right.
even improvise during the solos, during the guitar solos. It was always an attempt to play, to copy even the solo note by note. Yeah.
Correct, 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 correct. And I saw some lovely sketches by Mario Miranda in the book. And
Yes.
tell the audience a little bit about your friendship and your how do you get to know him and how is he in your book? I mean, how are the sketches there? Tell us.
Well, Mario Miranda is the first cousin of Lucio Miranda, who was an architect in Goa and who sang like a god. He
Ah,
sang his old Portuguese and Latin songs and Goan songs. He was one of those guys that I really looked up to. He was senior to me, and when I finished architecture, I didn't want to work in architecture at all. But if at all I had to, I decided I would work with Lucio. So that's how close I was to Lucio.
mhm.
And both of us being into music, I used to accompany him on the guitar. He played the guitar as well. I used to accompany him. And Mario was Lucio's first cousin who lived in Bombay. So I must have met Mario for the first time through Lucio. And and we became friends too. I stayed at Mario's house once or twice when I went to Bombay. We used to meet in Goa. And then when Mario moved to Goa, we used to meet at almost every party, every party of common friends, including at Lucio's house, at my house. So yeah, Mario was somebody whom I admired so much, besides being a friend and somebody whose wit, of course, I loved, not only in his work but even in his real persona.
Mhm.
Uh, besides being a friend, he was somebody whom I admired.
Mhm.
Looked up to. So original in his style of drawing, in his choice of topics and subjects to draw and caricature. And he was a gentle and friendly soul who didn't really want to get into seriously political cartoons. That was not his scene. His was more of a social commentary about
Mhm.
the life in Goa. And that book that he he produced called Goa with Love will always remain as a testimony to life in Goa as we knew it, and as it will never ever happen again. And I'm so glad that he created that book, really.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah. You're right. You're absolutely right. And now I want to talk about Microwave Papadums, your own band.
Yes.
And of course, I didn't know about the terrible tragedy that happened with the band,
Mhm.
and what first the tragedy itself was so overwhelming, and
It
then
is.
I
It was.
yeah, it took a huge toll on you. I mean, how did you
Absolutely.
get over that? I mean, that's losing members of your band except for one, and these are guys whom you played with. They're
Yeah.
sort of so that was a terrible time in your life. And just tell us how
Yeah.
you sort of navigated that tragedy and how did you got back to forming a band again? Because you had then decided that never again would you form a band.
Never again would I form a band. I decided that never again would I perform. Not only in a band but even solo. I was done with music because music used to be painful to me. Picking up an
Mm.
instrument, listening to music was painful because music was connected with my band members who had died, and it was not just the death.
Just to tell the
It
audience a
was.
little bit, sorry to interrupt you, just to tell the audience that the band members had died in a horrible accident, and Remo got to know about it late in the night, and he didn't even know who they were, who all and how many survived, and he got to know everything the next morning. So it was a traumatic wait. I mean, I just can't think of somebody who had to go through this. So it is in that context that Remo is talking now. Please continue.
Yeah. It was traumatic in that context. The death of my band members was already traumatic enough. But then when I went there and I saw that out of the four families, out of the four band members who had died, there were the families of two who felt the need to put the blame on somebody for a road accident. For goodness sake, a road accident is a road accident, and if at all it's somebody's fault, it's the fault of the drivers. It's the fault of the authorities who don't keep our roads safer here in India. Uh, Certainly not the band leaders' fault. But there I was. I went back to Kanpur and I tried very hard to get the four bodies back to Goa, almost on my own, except for the help of Chote Bai, which I've described in detail in the book, how he appeared out of nowhere and helped me like crazy. Uh, and this blame from the two families was perhaps one of the worst things to deal with at that time, besides all the official the red tapeism in getting the bodies embalmed and out of the morgue for the embalming, and the permissions to fly them and to reach back in Goa. And it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. You ask me how I got out of it. I don't know. I don't know really, because that's enough. That kind of an incident in somebody's life is enough to turn you into an alcoholic, a drug addict, or worse still, worse still, into a religious fanatic. Uh, but I didn't. I didn't turn into any of those, luckily. And finally, what helped me to get out of it was, number one, was a trip out of Goa and out of India after the 1 month pass. Because of the looks and the stares that I was getting from from those families who were, like I said, blaming me for a road accident. And the second thing that helped me when I came back from Europe was going into the studio and recording 2 pieces of music, dedicated to the band members. And that was like a purge, like a cleansing in my soul, like letting out all my feelings and everything about it through music. And in the beginning, it hurt. Again, like I told you, listening to music and playing music especially was physically painful. I used to get a pain in my stomach, in my chest. I never knew that the sadness and despair could cause physical pain, but I learned it then. I learned that lesson at that time. And through that pain, I went on. I insisted on myself, and I recorded, and I composed, and I recorded those 2 songs. One was called The Empty Stage.
Okay.
The other one is called A Fishbowl Called Life. And these are the things which slowly brought me back into the world of the living, because I was living in the world of the dead.
Okay.
I had lived with 4 dead bodies of my dear ones, with whom I played for up to 12 years. With whom I played for up to 12 years. And it was terrible.
Okay.
Even when I was reliving all that in order to write about it in the autobiography, I went through almost a week, the whole week that I wrote about it, the week or 10 days that I took to write those 2 chapters. I was back in that state of mind. I was back in that depressed and horrible state of mind. And Xenia at home knew it. It was palpable. And although that state of mind was just a fraction of the state of mind I'd been in at that time, although it was just a fraction, it still brought back all those memories and that state.
Okay.
It's a terrible thing to go through. I lost my parents. I lost loved ones after that. But there's nothing as. But I don't think I went through any experience which is as terrible, because losing your parents, they've lived a full life. Of course, you're going to miss them, at whatever age they die, you're going to miss them. But these guys went in their prime in an accident. It was not a natural death, in an accident. And then the blame.
Mhm.
It was the worst period of my life. That's all I
Okay.
can say.
Yeah, yeah. But as they say, music sort of heals and is somehow has holds this ability to wash away our sorrows. If not wash away, at least help us put them aside and deal with
Yes,
them. So,
yes,
so you sort of took refuge in music, and it's good to see you back.
yeah.
Good
I
for us.
always did actually. Even now, like I wrote in the book, even if the house is collapsing all around me, I think if I'm in a recording studio or even if the house is on fire all around me, I could easily go to the studio and immerse myself in music
Right,
and work, and
right.
I could be oblivious to it all.
Now I want to ask you something which I've been dying to ask you, and it's about Jethro Tull.
Yes,
Jethro Tull is happens to be my favorite band too, and I managed to talk to Ian Anderson during their first trip when they came to Bombay in the '90s, late '90s,
I
and
see.
yes, and that chapter is also part of my book. But anyway, that's not it. So, I mean, tell me, I mean, this tryst with Ian Anderson and Jethro Tull backing you for those songs. Tell the audience about it. I mean, it's a fantastic thing. I mean, people who know music would know this is just, as you say, you describe Ian Anderson as God in your book in terms of the flute playing, and and
Absolutely.
and so and he says some lovely things about you in the book too, in the
Yes, he
line
does.
blurb, and it seems you all have developed a nice friendship. So, but before the
Yes,
friendship, tell us about the gig in Dubai and how was it Tal playing with Jethro Tull?
I know. It was unbelievable because Jethro Tull was a band that we used to listen to when we were in college again, on a much larger scale than I
Right.
just described how we used to also have a record of the Savages and a record of the Cavaliers. But Jethro Tull was something else. They were
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
really out of reach. They invented, I mean, Ian Anderson single-handedly invented a new style of playing the flute. He had a new style of composing music. The arrangements and everything they were unheard of before.
Right, right.
At that time, of course, there were lots of rock bands, but each one was doing a little bit of what the other one was doing, rock music. Uh, but this guy had a style all of his own, and we loved albums like Thick as a Brick and Aqualung were our favorites. We used to listen to them. And if at that time somebody had to tell me that one day I would be playing with Jethro Tull, I would have laughed. I would have just laughed, you know. But suddenly, out of the blue, his concert promoter in Dubai called up and asked me. That's it. It was as simple as that.
Okay.
He asked me, would you like to play with Jethro Tull? I said, what? And of course, I said yes. And then, as if there's anything else I could say or would say at that moment. And the next thing I knew is I was exchanging emails with Ian Anderson himself, and I was supposed to jam in, and they were supposed to back me up on one song of mine. And
What was the song?
I didn't know what to send him, so I sent him three. I said, you choose. I sent him songs which had the flute in them, like Bombay City, which had a flute introduction, a flute solo in the middle, and a flute riff here and there. The second one, I forget. I think O Meri Munni was another one, which also has a flute introduction and a flute solo. And of course, the famous flute song,
Flute
which I
song.
call the flute song, which is actually a folk song from the Northeast, which I
Yes.
rearranged and adapted and do it my way. And he was supposed to choose one out of those three. And the next thing I know is he tells me, okay, we're going to do all three. So you send me some more. And
Wow.
I think I couldn't believe it. Jethro Tull was going to back me. Listen, this was just getting more and more unreal. They were rehearsing my songs So I would be playing and singing them, and they would be backing me. And I would be also, of course, playing and jamming with three of their songs on three of their songs. That was a given that I was supposed to jam and accompany them. But them accompanying me, well, it was something else. That I was going to meet them and all this was absolutely out of
Surreal.
the world. Yes, absolutely surreal. And I went to Dubai and I met him for the first time that morning. I was tongue tied. Uh, I'm a professional musician, but I can be a big fanboy, absolute fanboy. I go all tongue tied, starry eyed when I meet somebody I admire and respect and look up to. And that's how I was when I met him. And he put me right at ease with his Scottish humor and
Right.
the jokes about Vindaloo and his trips to Goa and stuff like that. And it was great fun at the press conference in the morning. And after that, we had breakfast together, I think, or lunch together. And
Oh,
and then the next day, there was this long rehearsal. There were two members of my band who came down from Goa. And we had this long rehearsal, which was about 7 hours long. And the rest of Jethro Tull also came down the next day. I thought that they were all living in the same place in England, and I had imagined them all rehearsing my songs together somewhere in some rehearsal room. Then I came to know that all of them lived in absolutely different places. One of them even lived in America,
America.
but that
Right.
he had sent them the tapes and the notes, and each one of them had done their homework precisely.
Wow. Wow.
So they sat at their instruments and they played O Meri Munni as if they'd played it for I don't know how long. They played Bombay City again the same way, the Flute Song. And that's when I realized something, you know, we think that the higher you go into the professionals and the superstars, the less they need to rehearse because they are so good and stuff like that. But it's just the other way around. The higher you go, you see that the harder they work. And well, it's obvious, because they work hard, that's how, that's why they are superstars. That is why they are
Correct.
up
Correct.
there and not the other way around.
Right.
And
So is there a recording of this concert?
yes, there is a recording which Yen sent me 1 or 2 weeks after the concert, but I have not let it, but I have not made it public, and I don't want to release
Here's
it
an
or
idea.
anything.
Please do
It's
make
just
it public. Let us all hear it properly.
it's just a personal. Sorry,
I said, here's an idea. Please do make it public and let us all hear it once at least. Release it. Ian
no, I
wouldn't
don't.
mind, and nor would you.
No, I don't think he would mind. I don't remember now what we discussed at that time, whether whether he had any objections to it being made public. I
Okay.
don't remember. If at all I thought of making it public now, I would have to ask him first because I
Right,
don't
right.
remember what we discussed at that time. But I myself would not like to make it public, because
I see.
a live performance is a live performance, and it's more for our memory, for our archives, for our personal kind of thing.
And memories for those who were lucky to be there.
Yes, yes. There was a huge international and Indian audience, which
Okay.
was in fact the whole aim of the organizers
Okay.
to,
Okay.
to
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we take some questions, I believe the film on Remo that we couldn't screen earlier is ready. We will be screening it now. It's a 3-minute short film. After which I will talk to Remo. I'm not going to let him go so easily. I'm going to talk to him about two other songs of his, and
great.
then we will 2 or 3 songs of his, and then we are going to take questions. If there are any questions, get them ready. Hopefully we'll be seeing them scroll across our screens and I could have Remo answer them. So if we could have the film, please.
A great singer and an amazing musician, Remo Fernandes is known as the pioneer of Indian pop music. Remo performs pop, rock, and Indian fusion. He is also a film playback singer. Remo's musical work is a fusion of many different cultures and styles that he has been exposed to as a child in Goa and in his later travels around the world. Such influences include Goan and Portuguese music, Sega music, African music, Latin music, and the music of erstwhile European communist states, those of the dance halls from Jamaica and soca. After graduating, Remo traveled in Europe and North Africa between 1977 and 1980, performing with fusion rock bands and even releasing an album, Rock Synergy, in Paris in 1979. He then returned to Goa and immersed himself in its hippie culture. He met a group of traveling European artists who named themselves the Amsterdam Balloon Company and began playing at their concerts at Baga. Remo Fernandes also performed in Amsterdam with Lucas Amor, violinist in his group, and released a record called Venus and the Moon in 1981. He also formed his own band of fusion music called Indiana. Remo's Hindi, pop, rock, and film songs became instant hit with the Indian masses, earning him gold, platinum, and double platinum discs. His writings and singing songs in English made his success rare and more distinctive. His compositions in English reflect life and socio-political happenings in India with which every Indian identifies. A popular stage performer in India, he has also taken part in many musical festivals around the world. Remo Fernandes has performed with international artists like Jethro Tull, Led Zeppelin, and Leo, making the entire country so proud and recognized due to his amazing work. Remo Fernandes has won multiple awards like Press Critics Award, Audience Favorite Award, and an overall second prize at Dresden International Song Competition. He was honored with Padma Shri by the Indian government. We are extremely privileged to welcome Mr. Remo Fernandes at the Pune International Literary Festival 2021.
Wow, that was nice and short. So that gives us a snapshot of the accolades that Remo has, received through his career. Now I wanted to talk about a few songs.
Yes.
Um, just hearing the voiceover in the film about the languages you sing in and the kinds of music that sort of encompass your over. It's a bit of a Marquisian delight, It's I'm reminded of you speak of Gabriel Marquez in while describing Goa, and I would
Yeah.
like to describe your music in that. If one were to describe what does Remo sing, I'd say, well, it's like a Marquisian delight.
Wow.
It's such a wide palette that you sort of do. So we spoke of the flute song. Yes, you
Yeah.
said it was a northeastern folk song. Yes, I was the first time I heard the flute song. I remember I was long, and I was then reminded of Bhupen Hazarika's "Aaj Jibon Khuje Pabi." That's the Bangla song we heard. It's an Assamese song, and
I
it is
see.
in the same vein. And
I
it
see.
was and for me that familiarity sort of was an instant was the reason why I sort of took a liking to the flute song immediately. Then then now let's talk a little bit about Jalwa, the track that sort of made you you in the Bombay film world, but you described it to my surprise as a track you didn't know. You went into the studio, recorded it, and forgot about it and came out.
No, no,
That's
no, no. That was not Jalwa.
that was not
That
Jalwa.
was
Okay.
no, that was Hamma Hamma.
Okay, that was Hama Hama. Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay. So Jalwa was a track of our time when we were in college. That came out. That was a huge success. Lot of
Yes, it was actually. Thank God. Yes.
and
By the grace of God, you say.
yes. Anything you want to tell us about that track when you did it, when you were approached?
Uh, well, I remember that disco was the big thing in India then, in
Yeah.
uh, in the Hindi films in Bollywood, and I hated that kind of disco in Bollywood. Uh, and So when I was asked to do this track for this film, I decided to do it, uh, to do disco in my way, in my
Okay.
style. There was not at all the traditional disco, uh, beat, And I decided
Yeah.
to you have to make it one long improvisation and scatting, a lot of scatting, with the voice and instrumentals, because my Hindi was almost non-existent at that time. It was comical, if at all. Uh, and so I recorded this 4 or 5 minute track, and I took it to Gul Anand, who was the producer of the film, and he took it into his office to listen to it. And I was wondering whether he was going to like it or not, and I asked him for a princely sum of 10,000 rupees for it at that
Wow.
time.
Wow.
And he came out of his office looking very serious, but holding out a check of 11,000 rupees for me. And he said, "This is fantastic. This is brilliant. But instead of 5 minutes, I want you to make it 15 minutes long."
Oh my God.
I was wondering how the hell I was going to improvise for another 10 minutes. It was already uh, quite an effort, to repeat. It's a whole sequence. It's a sequence of, I don't remember how many bars, which goes back to the chorus saying "Dekho dekho ye hai jalwa," and then a couple of times, and then again the sequence, and then again "Dekho dekho ye hai jalwa." So I had to repeat all those sequences twice more. If there were
Right.
5 sequences, I had to make
Right.
it. You know. But I did it. I went home and I did it, and put it all together. And yes, and like you said, it became a huge hit, and luckily for me, and it was a trendsetter. It was a
Yeah. Yeah.
it was a milestone. It was a kind of a milestone in
Yeah, because Bollywood didn't have songs
Bollywood
like that.
music.
There was a
No,
proper
no,
song, chorus,
yeah,
and a little bit of an interlude, and then
exactly,
again another three verses. But this was
exactly,
something totally different. And
exactly,
yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
And as you can imagine, after the success of Jalwa, there was a lot of pressure from a record company at the time to recreate or to reproduce another Jalwa. They
Ah,
even came out, they even came out with this silly suggestion saying you can do a song called "Khao Khao Ye Hai Halwa." You know, it's such a trend to repeat something that's been
yeah, yeah,
successful.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
And it's so Bollywood to always ask for a repeat of a success.
exactly. No, I think it's a worldwide thing. I
Worldwide
really
thing,
think
right,
it's a
right,
worldwide thing. Yeah, even
right,
international artists
right.
tend to do that. And
I'm afraid,
but I
Remo, we
didn't
are running
want.
out of time. I'm
Oh,
being sort of messaged constantly. So
okay,
we'll quickly take a few questions.
okay.
One is come from Bipin Chandra Chaugule. You were and are the truly first and the only superstar of Indian pop music scene. Konkani is a very, very close to Marathi. Why didn't and don't you do new songs in Marathi? You will sweep the field completely.
Well, why I don't do them? Because I guess I could have if I really wanted to, and if all that I wanted was to sweep things away. But I like to do things which come to me naturally, uh,
Right,
and which I really feel like creating. As an artist, as a creative artist, you create things because they touch you, and they have to come out of you, and they have to come out of your heart, out of your soul, out of your mind, whatever it is. But it's
right,
got to come out of you, and not because, oh, that market is interesting. There's a fantastic market in Maharashtra. So let me sing in Marathi. That has never been my approach to making music.
right,
So I guess
right.
I'm a great lover of Marathi music. I love Lavani, the music, the beat, the songs, they're fantastic. But I never really had the time to try and do music in different languages and stuff like that because I wanted to, corner different markets. That has never been my approach to music. Markets have never been my approach to music.
I'm not surprised to hear that at all. Well, I there is another question. Before that, there are basically these are comments. They just want to sort of say hello, and these are not really questions. Lalita Balasubramaniam says that since guitar is your favorite instrument, do you find it easier to compose a song or tune while playing the guitar? Well, that is a question, and I think you answered that.
But
You
I've
answered
answered that,
that.
yes.
Right,
And in the
right. So
meanwhile,
we
everybody who just said hello or hi, and hello to everybody who said that.
Ashisha Chakraborty says the sheer variety of music you brought to the Indian scene livened up the milieu for us. I think that's very true. I think that's
Thank
absolutely right.
you. Thank you very much. It
Absolutely.
feels so good to hear this.
Manjari Prabhu says, listen to the rain in Saulin is my favorite. Listen to it all the time in college. Wow. Wow,
Wow,
that's nice.
that's lovely. It's a
Then
song I wrote
Purnima,
for Seoul when I came to live here in this village, in my
okay.
ancestral village.
Purnima Prabhu says, sometime in the late 80s, we had heard that Remo's wife is expecting and Remo is experimenting music training with his child right from the time the child was conceived. Firstly, is that true? And if yes, then can you please say something about this music based experience of yours? Thanks, Purnima Prabhu.
Well, it was not an experiment or something on a baby, but I composed a lullaby. I composed a lullaby for the child way before he was born. And what I did, because I had read that children could hear and identify with music and sounds even from the womb. So I made this recording and I used to play it by our bedside every night. And I attended the delivery. I was in the delivery room myself, and I took a tape recorder to play this lullaby while the delivery, while the whole process was taking place. And by the end of the delivery, the doctor himself, the doctor himself was whistling along with the tune and humming along with the tune. And the baby was born, and luckily I had the presence of mind at that time to stop the tape recorder and to press record, because I thought of recording the very first sound that came out of the child's mouth. And I managed to do that, and I recorded his first cry, his first sounds. And then when I did a final recording of this lullaby, I put those cries of the first cries of the baby in the beginning of the lullaby. And so, yeah, that was all that
Wow.
happened.
Right.
That's what happened. Yeah.
Santosh Bhakia says, excellent interaction. Listen to the rain in Saulin. Wow. I think on that note, we're going to end this afternoon's discussion with Remo. Thank you so much, Remo, and thank you,
Shantanu,
Kunal.
I really want to tell you, and this is not just the usual stuff that I tell an interviewer. I really enjoyed your questions. I really enjoyed the fact that you have really gone through the book in detail. I really enjoyed your knowledgeable questions about songs and about music. It was a pleasure doing this interview. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much. And ladies and gentlemen, here's the book. This is how it looks. So get a copy. It's a fascinating read, fantastic pictures and lovely, lovely paintings. So we shall say bye. And there was lots more to ask, Remo, but well, we don't have time. Maybe some other time. Maybe some other
Let them
time.
buy, let them buy the book and find out.
Exactly. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody, and bye
Thank
bye from
you.
us. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
This heartfelt conversation and wholesome discussion. Some old memories were certainly treaded along the way. Thank you, Mr. Remo Fernandes and Mr. Shantanu Datta, for being our guests. We will be back with our next session after a short break. Please join us for Max Muller Bhavan Presents City of Jasmine at 4:15 p.m.